There was an instance a few years ago when I was still the director of the After School Satan Club where I had been doxxed by a family member who was very upset about what I was doing. And this person got a hold of that information, found me, showed up at my house, and they had a 9mm on hand. They were intent on
Holy
killing
shit.
me.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I wish I was joking. So that happened because their belief was that I was there to indoctrinate children into Satanism.
Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
I'm Casey.
And today we're hanging out with our friend Blake, who you will hopefully remember from the Back in the Cool Day podcast. We did one with them, him and his buddy Eric, and then they joined us for an episode. So
for sure,
Blake and I were messaging back and forth over the past week or two or three. Actually, this started a little while ago, but we figured let's just have him come on, hang out. We got some stuff to talk about. But before we get into that, before we hit record, Casey mentioned a little story about the band Maylene and the Sons of Disaster. So I had a little story about them that I thought would be fun to share because it is in the vein of growing up Christian. So I don't remember who was playing with them. I'm not a big Maylene fan, or I wasn't at the time. Maybe I'd like them now, but the Southern rock thing wasn't my jam. So I wish I could
into it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I was into it too.
So my venue near me, where all the shows that I went to were as a kid in high school, was the Worcester Palladium. Actually, that's still the only place I seem to go for shows because anything further than 25 minutes away seems too far to go for me.
Right.
But anyway, so we would always go outside after the shows to like hang out, and hopefully the band members would be out back loading up their, I don't know, maybe some of them would be loading up their buses, but you always hope that you'd like run into them and be able to have a conversation. And that happened a couple of times. Jesse, who's, for the listeners, who's been on a good few times now, who I mentioned a number of times. He's usually part of all of my stories because we literally never get together. But he had his voicemail recorded by Tim Lambesis at one point. So if you, whenever, like, yeah, it's fucking sick. So whenever you call him and be like, "Hey, this is Tim from As I Lay Dying. You've reached Jesse's phone." And it was like, that was his voicemail forever. He regretted not having that available still after Tim
I heard he got married
for
he got married for a third time recently. I just read.
Is that the third time?
The third time.
I didn't know it was the third. But
I did see the wedding photos, like beachfront wedding.
Yeah.
You can go look at them on Instagram.
Yeah,
it's a weird affair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I feel like there's a lot you could say about that, but I also don't know what I'm allowed to say about that, so I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Anyway,
in the voicemail recording, did Tim like mention anything about how you could send him some money for commissary if you felt like it?
Yeah, it's actually, if you go back and listen to it, it's code. There's like all these little hints on where bodies are buried, and he just never knew.
Send me a nice water bottle for my toilet wine.
So we're hanging out outside after a Maylene show, and we don't hang out with the band guys, but there's some weirdo back there. I feel like he said he was friends with them or knew them or some shit. He was like he said he was a youth pastor. I think he was that guy that hung around youth group too long that gave himself the title. I don't know if
Yeah.
He was one of those that was like, he just met us. He was too old to just be hanging around wanting to talk to like random ass high school kids. He gave us his life story, and I don't remember a lot of it, but it definitely involved wives leaving and being very sad. And he told us about a Bible verse that is not a Bible verse at all, but it was he said he talked a lot about masturbation, and that's what was weird. We're like, we don't know you, so it's weird that you're talking to us a lot about masturbation. He said,
good icebreaker. Always a good icebreaker.
Yeah, great icebreaker. Incidentally, that's also what he called his dick. He goes, it says in the Bible that it's better for a man to spill his seed on the ground than to plant it in the belly of a whore. And I was like,
damn.
Oh, it says that in there? Okay. And we were like, hey, I guess that's a free pass. We don't have to think about it anymore. It's better for us to jerk off than to have sex before married. And that's how we took it. Well, I went home and looked at that Bible verse. It's just not real.
It was a quote that he found on r/incels is correct, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like an incel motto. They have T-shirts for it.
Incelipians.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
But I can't hear about Maylene in the Sons of Disaster without thinking about that guy making up Bible verses about jerking off and then talking to strangers.
So what is that? Is that just like a saying or something like that? Because I've definitely heard that expression before, but it's not in the Bible.
That's a new one for me. I've not heard that one.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the only thing in the Bible about masturbating, and it's not really even about masturbating. It's about having a strong pull-out game is what it's about.
It's a James Dobson quote.
Yeah, it's like Odin. Oh, is it Onan? Oh, something like that was the name of the guy who he was supposed to have sex with his dead brother's wife, and he just pulled out, and God killed him for it, or some shit like that.
Yeah, that's the only one. That's the only reference in the Bible that I recall about spilling your seed. But
yeah, I don't know. And then there's the one about that Jesus talked about, where you sow your seed all over the place. I think he was talking about just coming everywhere. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
it's like rocky soil, fertile soil. I think he was just like, wherever you want, it's fine.
Subway floors.
Yep.
He must have just like getting down outside, apparently.
Yeah.
Jesus
was all about it. I think that's one of those things that really people misunderstood about him.
That's right.
Very pro masturbation.
Yeah, we skipped those verses. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Weird. Yeah. Anyway,
our code in youth group for masturbation was running a mile. So when we
really
discuss, when we would have the accountability circles, which really is creepy, but I might have to breach this with my parents next time I'm with them. So like, you send me to youth group every week, and this is the conversations we would have, and this grown-ass man would be like checking in on us and how often we were quote unquote running a mile every week.
You walk back in to choir practice and like, why are you so sweaty? Like, just ran a mile.
I just sent a PR in the marathon this week, man. So
oh my God, I like that one. That's a fun expression.
That's right. That was the code, so we could
It'll
talk
come
about
in handy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Boom.
I got it.
Boom.
Just squeeze that one out real quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what? Okay, so
segue.
Yeah, segue. Gun violence. Do you guys like it or no? For or against gun violence?
Big 2 thumbs down for gun violence.
2 thumbs down. What about you, Casey? 1 up,
I'm
1
still
down.
doing my own research.
Doing your own research. Depends on how much it impacts your freedoms, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's a trade-off I'm not willing to make. So
it's unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm for it personally. I love it. I think it's great that we're getting more of it. I think we're only going to get more of it going forward too. So for those of you who are enjoying this, it's not going to slow down. So welcome to the new America.
Which is interesting. And I was thinking about where to start with all this, but when you say new America, I think that's where I'm going to start. Because I remember growing up, as in a Christian home, the United States is great because it's a Christian nation, and we're blessed. We're the only country on earth where we can go to church and we can go to ball games. We can go all these places without having to be worried about being blown up or shot or whatever.
For your faith.
For your faith. And you are now you're absolutely correct. It's a new America where you can't go anywhere without the risk of possibly being shot. And it's infuriating and it's frustrating. You can't go to parades. Like what?
Yeah, it's weird, dude.
You can't go to school. You can't go to church. You can't go to the movie theater. You can't go to the mall. You can't go to the nightclub. You can't go anywhere. Dude breaks windows in Las Vegas and shoots down on an outdoor concert. Like, it's unreal. And no one wants to do anything about it. well, I shouldn't say no one, but there's such a loud resistance to stopping such, like, if this is an unacceptable social plague, like it's flat out wrong. Like there's no, I don't want to hear about how great America is until this is fixed, because like it's an abhorrent social issue that needs to be.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, I think what's crazy about it is, one, you're right about, can't going anywhere. So obviously one of the more recent, I don't know if there's one since July 4th and now July 10th when we're recording this intro here, but yeah, so there's the shooting on the 4th of July, and then,
well, there was multiple shootings on the 4th of July. That was just that one that got a ton of attention.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's like,
and I was at an event, it wasn't on the 4th. Oh, was it? Maybe it wasn't the 4th. Either way, I just remember walking. It's like a big crowded area. And you're walking around, you're like, it's so weird. You can't walk around a big crowd anymore without thinking, this looks like a great place for something like this seems like the kind of place that something like this would just happen now. Like it's always just crowds. It's unsuspecting, or now you're just suspecting it. But I don't know. It is like, it's like kind of just like domestic terrorism at this point, in the way that it's in your head anytime you're in a crowded space.
For sure.
I think that's an accurate description of what it is, period. And, I don't know. It's a hard thing to sort through. I've listened to several different podcasts about it from different viewpoints on so it's hard to really like try to put a beat on like why this is happening so much now. Because I mean, that's part of the problem we've got. And this is part of the practical issue with like trying to figure out how you're going to, like, how do you make a dent in a problem like this with, gun laws and stuff, given where we are now? Because I mean, there's more guns than people, I think, in the U.S.
It's like trying to stop an avalanche now. Like,
yes,
you could have put up those fucking barriers, whatever you have beforehand, but it almost feels too far gone.
There are almost 400 million guns in the United States. Since 2020, there's been 40, and these are, I mean, people can fact check me, but I could be wrong, but 45 million more guns since 2020. I mean, it's insane.
I believe it.
Well, every time that there's like, an event or a politician or something like that talks about gun control and stuff, like gun sales boom.
Yeah.
It's like the best thing in the world for the gun industry. Like,
which is horrible. Like, what does that say? I mean, it's terrible.
But
I don't know.
There's been a lot of guns here for a long time, and really, like, there were some instances before Columbine, but like Columbine forward, this has been like just an ongoing thing. And I don't know how many there's been. Like if you just talk about school shootings in particular, there's been tons since Columbine, and they go in waves. And I think that kind of speaks to the fact that it's almost like it's like a social contagion.
Yeah.
Where, know, if you're disgruntled and you're trying to make a statement and your goal is to hurt people, like, it's pretty clear what the worst target is if you want to create a stir and an impact and want to hurt people. And it's, I don't know, it's terrible. I mean, the parade thing was, it's the same motive. It's somebody trying to make a statement by hurting a lot of people,
Right.
And this kid was, go ahead, Blake.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Casey.
This kid was just
Sam.
No, you got it. I got you. This kid is obviously really like fucked up. The 4th of July one, I think that's particularly why it gets even more attention as time goes on, is because like the messages that he had a Discord server that it was just all glorifications of violence and really fucked up things. And I mean, it's hard to not say this was the natural conclusion of where this kid was going, and there were a lot of red flags along the way. I guess I'm thinking about this in regard to what you said, Casey, is like, what do we like? It's like a social contagion. Like it's like something that's catching on. It's like an act of violence that's like, it is almost contagious now. People are like, they hear about it and they're like, oh, maybe I could do something. I wonder if I have something like that in me. Like there is a sort of, I don't know if we live in a world where you can't not, give these things publicity, but you wonder how much the dwelling on them has allowed for people to almost daydream about it in a way, and let it really settle in. If they're broken enough to allow something like that to influence their behavior. I don't know. I'm a
Well,
sociologist.
you hear a common excuse afterwards. It's like, well, it's a mental health issue. We need more mental health screens. We need all this stuff. It's very clear that there's a mental health issue if someone is willing to go in and shoot up an elementary school. Like,
absolutely,
that's almost like a red herring to distract you. Like, yes, clearly this person has a mental health issue. Like, that's an insane behavior. It's so that to kind of say, oh, well, we need to do better mental health, and then as someone who lives in Texas and who is a teacher, you have our governor who comes out and says, well, we need to do more about mental health and everything like that. That man has done the opposite of that. He's restricted mental health access. He's passed laws where guns are less restrictive, more open carry, more guns. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because you have this violent fetish where you have people who are angry. And while I agree, so this is going to be a bombshell. Tucker Carlson said something that I agree with. He was
holy shit.
He was misguided in how he said it and was trying to he was being an asshole about it. And he was he was doing his Tucker Carlson thing. He said that a lot of these guys are angry at women. And he took it off to as if it was women's fault that they were mad at him. But they're angry at women. And I think a lot of them...
You should have just slept with them. Was that his point?
They shouldn't be, feminism. He was blaming feminism and all this stuff because he made these men angry. I think you see a lot of that with these incel populations, and I mean
Elliot Rodgers types.
Elliot Rodgers types, absolutely. So I agree with him there. And then you have, I think what you're kind of seeing is this kind of death thralls of toxic masculinity being challenged and lashing out with anger, and the only thing that they have left as this is being social, or as people who are trying to change that socially, is that they lash out violently because it's the only thing they have left. And then you have the flip side of that toxic masculinity is oh, I'm going to have a gun on me and I'll stop this gun guy, which is, if we have the most guns in the world, 400 million guns in the world, we're the only country that has this epidemic. Clearly more guns isn't the answer because it's not stopping it. And so these arguments that keep coming around are just asinine. And I think you're right. Well, it's happening.
You're obviously, like you said, you're in Texas where the whole being able to open carry just got a lot easier, right? Where you are.
Yeah.
It's you can just do it. You don't need you could just do it.
You're at
sort of paperwork.
I mean, there's some rules now. There's some private businesses that have little signs on the walls or the doors on the entrance. So I guess there's some restrictions there. But I mean, I've been in a barbecue joint where this dude just has a big fancy gold pistol on his hip, and it's fucking lame. That is the most small dick energy I've ever seen.
It's so lame. It is. And the golden gun. He just loves the fucking golden gun from Nintendo 64's
GoldenEye. It's so defeats the purpose of carrying a gun too, where you're making yourself a target if there was a situation where you might use a gun to try and help out. It's so dumb.
Yeah, shoot that guy first.
Yeah. Brandishing it out in the open, because I don't know exactly what Texas's rules are, but here we don't have really any rules. You can open carry, you can concealed carry without a license. There's very little restrictions in place here. But if you actually obey the public ordinances, businesses, for instance, most businesses have a no guns allowed sign and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but nobody that I've ever seen open carrying that wasn't law enforcement has looked like a stable, smart individual.
No.
And they usually pair it with a huge knife on the other hip.
Yeah. And just I mean, it's really, especially in Texas, it's like a caricature of a person, honestly. And I don't.
It is.
Yeah. And I know it might sound judgmental, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that same dude who wants to carry a pistol around everywhere he goes also just refused to wear a mask during COVID-19 because he wasn't going to live in fear. But he was going to carry a fucking pistol wherever he goes so he can feel like some kind of man and some tough guy. It's like they, in my opinion, and I have a lot of conversations with people about why they feel this need to just have this unlimited amount of weapons. And it's always motivated by fear. I need to have an AR-15 to fight a tyrannical government, which dude, they're going to drop a drone on you from 30,000 feet in the air. What are you going to, that's not going to do anything. Your militia.
Do you think it's a real fear? I question, I don't. That's the response, but like it's like when you talk to Christians and you go, like their main motivator is the fear of hell, but it's like it's so abstract and not in their regular life that it's hard to believe that they really care that much about it, like because they're not out there evangelizing all the time. Like, do you think there's a real, lived, actual, like present fear in these people's minds, or do you think they just like have to say that in order to be able to just actually? And it's more of like a, I want to feel powerful thing. It's more. Do you think it's more power?
It's in the same vein as like the rapture, where like it's kind of assumed that eventually the government is going to come for your whatever. And honestly, like I feel like that's the least likely scenario given where we live. I feel like you're much more likely to see a situation where a group of armed idiots tries to do something stupid, you know.
Like those guys in Iowa that were in the whatever that white supremacist group was that they pulled over on their way to attack that
Idaho,
pride.
right?
Yeah, like that's the kind of stuff we're going to be seeing. Or like,
wait, when was this one?
This was recent.
It was a few weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah. And they were on their way to attack what?
I believe it was a pride event.
That's right.
Yeah, they were like, what was they officially like saying that they were going to counter protest or something, but they were armed and it was just a dumb.
I mean, it was just morons. A ton of they're all just sitting in the back of this U-Haul in the same uniform, like with their
Patriot
front,
right?
tucked in it. I mean, it's just so like it's so
31 people. Jesus,
I don't know. It might sound like dismissive to say it's so fucking lame, but it's so pathetic. It's just like such small dick, angry loser energy. And I know that's like, doesn't give it the type of seriousness it deserves, but
I think this is, so Sam and I have gone back and forth a lot on gun stuff. Cause you know, I grew up in having guns. I have quite a few guns. I have an AR-15. If that makes me part of the problem, then I guess we'll have to address it. But,
I used to have one. I used to have one. So I would love to have that conversation with you.
I think what's weird about this, because like, you know, Sam and I have talked about this where, you know, you don't have any guns, right? And you really don't know a lot of people who do, or that talk about it, right? Yeah,
I shouldn't say they're not in my immediate like social circle of like my friends don't, but family members, I know plenty of people with them, and that do like to talk about and like have their gun magazines laying out on their coffee tables or something like that. Like it's not out of my social sphere at all.
Here I feel like almost everyone I know has guns, and most of them have AR-15s.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know, you know, you'll get into conversations once in a while where somebody's like, hey, just in case, you know. But like I feel like the vast majority of people that I know in the circles that I hang out in, at least, don't have them for some sort of like paramilitary cosplay purpose, you know.
Yeah, you're the outlier with your friends on that one. It's weird.
Yeah.
Right?
That does seem to be like the majority of, you know, I think the AR-15 is a fascinating conversation as like a social icon. Because you see it on people's clothing, you see it on bumper stickers, like that gun itself and the defense that it gets is really a remarkable social, like almost like an idol.
So do you think, okay, here's the question I think that puzzles me is like why has this achieved the status that it has? And of course, you know, you can point to like the NRA and lobbying and stuff like that, politicians making it a talking point and everything. But I think like there's something more practical or at least like everyday relatable to a lot of the reasons why this has become such a thing with conservatives and stuff like that. And I almost wonder if like given the fact that, like, I mean, look, we're an empire in decline, right?
Yes.
I mean, the three of us are all in the same like general age group.
Yeah.
And we're like the first generation in a long time that is going to have like that is predicted to have a lower standard of living and a lower like net worth and stuff like that than our parents' generation. And that's only going to continue because it's just, we lived on borrowed money for a long time as a society.
Well,
right?
It's late stage capitalism, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we're the wealth disparity and stuff, even though conservatives like really tried not to talk about like wealth redistribution and wealth disparity and stuff like that. I think that there's like a general sense of like helplessness in the wake of, just the general situation that we all find ourselves in, where like we're all kind of like at the whims of like these enormous companies. Nobody really feels like they have any control over where they're going to be when it's time to retire. They don't know for sure that they're ever going to own a home. There's like so many uncertainties that are there, but like a gun gives you this feeling of like untouchable independence that like, hey, if nothing else, the apocalypse comes, I'm ready for it or something. I really think there's something to that.
I think I agree. And I think like number one, and just so for some context, I own a handgun to protect my home in case of an intruder. I think that is a reasonable like middle ground. I grew up in a family that had guns. We were taught that, gun safety was the most important thing. So then, taking that to the AR-15, I think one, it looks badass. I think we can all agree that it looks pretty sick. Like, I'm in favor.
Fan favorite in video games and stuff. You're like, fuck yeah, this gun.
So I think that
especially if it's 4 flashlights.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's customizable. I think for hobbyists, it just looks badass. I think, and I think it's also extremely powerful and effective. And it's like it's not really a home defense weapon. It's designed to, kill as many people as efficiently as possible. So I think what you said, it gives you a sense of power and control in a society that's feeling out of control. And I think conservatives especially are always fear-mongering that like liberals are out to do this and their way of life is being attacked and all this. So it's this like crutch that is given to defend. And I think like that gun specifically, in 2004, they repealed the assault weapons ban. And before then, so that's why I think it's blown up so much as well, because it became widely available.
There was at least some restrictions on like magazine capacity and things like that were a factor.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I think you guys are spot on with that. I think what's just tough is like Casey mentioned, we've talked about before, but like where do you go from here? Like it's clear that the majority of, I think this is this applies across the board with most issues that we're dealing with right now. We kind of have like it's funny because it was always a conservative talking point, and I get a little worried about getting lumped in with the wrong group of people when you talk about this, but we kind of have a runaway government at this point too, where like, I mean, you look at the recent Supreme Court rulings, it's like they can just unilaterally make a decision that affects millions and millions of people outside of any sort of democratic means.
They're the only body that can actually legislate at this point. Even though it's not what they're supposed to do.
It's wild. It's truly
100%
wild.
correct. You're 100% correct.
So like dealing with like that, we have typically like people who are in favor of gun restrictions are Democrats, typically. But it's like, you just watch how ineffective they are. They literally have done nothing for so long. It's just pathetic and aggravating.
Yes.
And the small government party is like, them and the Democrats are no different. They've sold their soul to corporations. We live in a corporatocracy. Like elections are essentially bought and paid for by the people that give them the most money, which are of course corporations. So it just trickles down that way. And it's like with everything running away from us, the will of the people is almost completely null and void. And I also think it's worth making the quick caveat that this is a lot of white people stuff when you talk about it like that too, because black and brown people have been completely underrepresented for quite a long time. So probably for them, they felt like the government's been like outside of the will of the people or not acknowledging their will for quite some time. But
and look, I mean, if there's a group of people who probably should give some serious thought to buying a gun, it's black and brown people. I mean, especially like given some of the things that are happening right now and stuff. I mean, Sam and I talk a lot about like Killer Mike. We're both fans of him. And
he's sick.
The thing that he always says is like, exactly. Yeah. He has a great show. They only did one season of it, which sucks.
Trigger
Warning on Netflix. And I think they did an episode about guns, if I remember right. But, Killer Mike's always like, we live 50 years outside of apartheid in the U.S. Like, why would I not be prepared for that scenario? I think there's something to that. I also think that, like, I don't know. I think at this point, like, given how crazy things are right now and, like, some of the things that, like, this ultra conservatives are pushing for, maybe it's I don't know. I hate to say it, but like maybe it's not a bad idea for people who aren't far right conservatives to have some weapons. I don't know. I mean,
I
you
think
hate to like add that to the conversation, but
can I speak to that real quick? I
Yeah,
think,
go
and
for it.
again, I am a white man. I cannot speak to the experience of a person of color, but just looking at the contrast between the situation that recently happened in Cleveland, where that a black man was running from the police from his vehicle, was shot 60 times in the back. They shot 90 times. And then you have the July 4th shooter who was also evading the police, who also tried to escape, who was arrested. And you see that contrast time after time after time. There is a white man who has slaughtered and murdered multiple people, like already has committed this murderous crime. He was taken in without incident. The gentleman, not the gentleman, the asshole. Yeah, let's edit that out. The dude that I don't want to fucking refer to him as gentleman, but the dude who shot up that black church, Dylan, what was his name?
Dylan Roof.
Yeah.
Dylan Roof. They handcuff him. They go and get him, Burger King or whatever it was, and you see time after time that black men are shot in their cars for a traffic stop, and like because of like the perception that they might have a gun, and it turns out to be a cell phone, and this all comes back, to Trayvon, and so like, and again, I cannot speak to the experience of a black man, but there's that stark contrast in just like white America versus black America, where even something as weapons, who white people demand that is a right that they can have an open carry. And like there was a dude who was arrested. He had like full body armor and an AR-15 strapped to his walking around in public, and he was arrested and charged for having brass knuckles. So like that, like what
So dumb.
that like the contrast between these two situations is just stark, and it none of it makes sense. And it's like I think you keep coming back to like there's such a middle ground to have steps to quell gun violence, but one side will refuse to have any kind of argument whatsoever.
Yeah. Well,
can I throw something in here too?
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, Sam, go ahead if you.
I just wanted to make the point that like it's often, I think one side is more to blame for the legislative frustrations, and that would obviously be the right. But again, the left has had plenty of opportunities to fix a lot of things, and they don't. And that's because they're just as in this. They have the same people's hands in their pockets.
Yes.
Too. So like they might not be actively, tearing down laws and making this more available, but there's been very little done to stop any of this when they've had the chance over the many times that they've had it. I just want to tie that back to like and finish out my thought on kind of the runaway government idea, which is that like on so many issues right now that are so many culture war issues, it's like 75-80% of the population's like, yes, let's fucking do this one thing. Let's do this thing. And it's just like, nope. And then you have a Supreme Court that goes, go fuck yourself. And then you have the Democrats and Republicans that also tell you to go fuck yourself. And it's just starting to feel even more frustrating for people who like it's hopeless. I honestly it's fucking hopeless. I see no way out of this. And that's really aggravating. And I think that that's the whole, where do we go from here question is, who knows? Voting doesn't fucking work anymore. It doesn't. No. We are a country in decline. It's just fucking over. Game, set, match on voting on your beliefs. We're stuck with a fractured two-party system that's never going to get better, and it's just going to keep.
And you said it,
lining their pockets. They're just going to line their pockets while we all have to fucking pretend like we're voting for this or that, and we're all fucking distracted by a culture war while they just fucking, have their child molestation rings. That's what they do, right? Yeah. It's like, jeez.
Well, it's the divide and conquer. Like we're all, fractured to right and left and bickering over these things while they continue to get unbelievably rich and have insider trading and all this stuff that just really benefits themselves, and nobody works for the people at all. Yeah. And the Republicans were smart enough to stack the Supreme Court, and then that's how they legislate what they want, and then no one can do anything about it because it can't be voted out. It can't be questioned. It's the law of the land. Yeah. And it does feel helpless. And especially, as a teacher, my wife's a teacher. We have a lot of friends who are teachers. And if I can take a moment to get on a soapbox and just like advocate that it's
For
fucked up.
teachers carrying in class is out. No.
Yeah, I want to advocate for that. But like, we feel hopeless. Like any day we go to work every day that not only do we have to like teach our kids and get shit on for kids and be accused of teaching CRT and all of this other shit and be the parent and all of this stuff. Now it's put on us that we need to, or now it's like being thrown around that the solution to gun violence is that the librarian and the lunch lady are going to carry guns to shoot down this dude with a high-powered rifle that the Uvalde police didn't want to even have a part of. And it's ridiculous. And it's just...
Lunch ladies can be pretty fucking tough, though, man.
That's true. I mean, if you're not going to eat your sloppy Joe, they're going to slap you back the head. But, like, it's just...
Lunch ladies are total melee weapon class, though.
I agree.
Brass knuckles. There you go.
That's right. They'll spatula the motherfucker.
Legalize brass knuckles for lunch ladies.
That's the legislation we need to validate.
That's what we need.
But I think, like, and then to turn schools into these lockdown prison, like...
Yeah, I know.
That's ridiculous because if learning is a very vulnerable thing, like you have to go into this relationship with your teacher knowing that like you have the possibility to look dumb and they need to guide you to learn things. And you're going to go in there and you're going to be scanned down and metal detectors and like make it look like this jail. And it's counterproductive to what teaching and learning is about. And it's a failure of society that that should be something that we should be proud of. When you talk about being patriotic and that progressives, quote unquote, hate this country. So we love the country and we want it to be better. And this is a thing, like having kids go to school and be blown apart by a high powered rifle that is an area where we can be better. And I don't think no one should disagree with about that. No one, like no society, no country that you should be proud of should have kids go to school and be blown apart to the point where they can't be recognized. And I think like that gun, that AR-15, I think a good place to start is to restrict it. And that can start with like 21 years old or tax stamps or, different things. And if people really, really want that, then like go to the range and rent it at the range in a controlled environment but this is becoming a problem. And as someone who grew up in a gun culture where you're taught that gun safety is the most important part, gun owners need to rise and say, okay, this is a fucking problem. And we need to come to the table and contribute to this conversation instead of just like acting like a petulant child and saying, no, I need to go have my fucking cosplay army man party every weekend with my dusty friends. And it's just great.
And if you, that's the thing that I keep coming back to too, and for gun owners is like, if you value gun rights, which I do. I mean, I hunt, I have, most of what I have is for hunting and things like that. But like the worst thing in the world for gun rights long term is for this kind of stuff to keep happening. This is the worst thing for your gun rights. If we can do something to lower this, and look, maybe we don't as a country agree on what to do about guns. I think one thing that we should absolutely all be able to get behind is red flag laws. And that's kind of taken on like a negative connotation. But dude, if there's anything we can do, it's let's take people at their word. All of these guys talk about this stuff before they do it. It happens time and time again. Somebody comes out and does something awful, and then we find out that they've been posting about it or messaging people about what they're going to do in advance. Like this rarely happens in some sort of a vacuum where it's a total surprise to everyone around the guy. And look, I'm not saying that there's not issues there from a free speech standpoint, but how many people do we have to like take seriously and say, hey, you were making like comments about shooting up a school, so we are going to quarantine you for a while until we deem you safe to be around the rest of society here.
Yeah.
And of course, you are not going to have AR-15s and different things like that while you're under, surveillance for this. And I it drives me nuts that like the conservative retort to like quote unquote red flag laws is like, well, my buddy had a crazy girlfriend and they got in a fight and she started slapping herself and saying she was going to tell the cops that he beat her. And that's the kind of stuff you're going to run into. Is that dictating policy? Is that what we're going to like not address this issue over, is because like somebody that who probably did punch his girlfriend said that she punched it. Like, it's so stupid.
It's like, let's not prosecute rapes either, because people will just say that sometimes. Like, we know that's, well, I guess we do that sometimes, but that's not the policy. Like, we didn't make policy based on the fact that
at least have it on the books, you know?
Yeah. And so many of the excuses are about these hypothetical situations that aren't in existence. And you say, okay, that might happen, but what is happening now is there's an epidemic of children being shot at school. So that's like actually happening. So let's worry about that more than something that doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
And let's face maybe the actual problem that does exist and do something about it instead of coming up with any kind of bullshit excuse to not address it.
And if you start taking people at their word, are you going to catch some like 15-year-old edgelords in your net that never had any intention of actually following through on it? Yes, of course. How many of those people face consequences before people start saying, oh, that's not a thing that we joke about. I'm going to not say those things on Reddit or whatever.
You can't yell fire in a movie theater. You can't yell bomb on a plane.
Yes,
like, those things exist. So if it is like, if it's not, it's
you
not
can't say school shooting in a Discord, like and for real. There we go.
It's the natural evolution of the society that we now live in. Like that is the exact same qualifier of what that is. Like that in that situation where it's a highly populated, dense area of people, that threat cannot be joked about. And that same situation needs to be applied for schools. And if kids have to get like thrown in jail for a couple weeks to make sure that they're not going to do that, then they'll fucking learn their lesson.
Yeah. I think that helps curb this big time. And we won't always hear about the success stories. That's the thing with like legislation and stuff that goes into effect, is like, we're not always going to hear about the school shooting that didn't happen because we picked up the kid who was chatting about it on Discord or Reddit,
Yeah.
But look, if we can stop one of these with some simple measures that punish people who are stupid and say dumb things. I mean, all of this, it's like we said earlier, like this is an act of terrorism. Terrorism is like violence that's done to get a message across, and in some cases, I think the message is just like, I hate humanity and I want to hurt people and I want to be noticed. But if you want to be noticed, you don't show up unannounced to do these things. Like you talk about them beforehand. You want the prestige that comes with doing these awful things. They talk about it. Let's focus on taking people at their word and heading these things off the curve before they show up to a school with an AR.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think you solved it, Casey.
I think so. Yeah. You guys are welcome.
You're right on the money. And you know what? What I like about your plan, I noticed that you get to keep your AR-15.
Should I run as a Republican or a Democrat, or I'm gonna go like Green Party?
Green Party.
Okay.
All the way. All right, we should wrap this up. Blake, thanks for
thank you guys.
Thanks for hanging out with us. This is fun.
For sure.
Yeah, good to talk to you, man.
For sure. Thank you guys.
We our guests, we have two. We have Dex and Chalice. They are both ministers of Satan with the Satanic Temple. It's really fun to talk to them. I didn't know much about the Satanic Temple. Their headquarters is in Salem, Massachusetts, which is cool because that's near me. And I'm looking forward to actually checking out the Satanic Temple next time around that area.
And Sam's ancestors burned their answers. So.
Yeah. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know the difference between that and the Church of Satan. And that came up before we started recording. So we jump right into that. But it was just a lot of fun. It was cool to, hear their perspective. And I mean, honestly, there's a lot that I think most people can get down with. And it just kind of reskins maybe the way you exist in the world, or provides community or something like that, and has a purpose. So it was fun. Dex and Chalice were great. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation.
If you're enjoying the podcast, share it with your friends, share it with your mom and dad. So, this would be a great way for you to come out to your mom and dad that you don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah.
Just like spring it on them and be like, hey, you're on a road trip this week. Listen to this podcast. You'll like it. And they won't. But then, you won't get asked to pray at Thanksgiving. But if you like the podcast, share it. And if you could, leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to it, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. And we have a great Discord server. You can find the link in our Instagram profile, but it's a great place to talk to like-minded people who have been through a lot of the same things, share your stories, memes, make
Pictures
fun
of your
of
pets.
Yeah, pictures of the pets has become a big part of it. Which
everybody loves the pets.
Yeah,
pets are great.
So yeah, all of those things. And that being said, enjoy our conversation with the Satanic Temple.
Hey everybody, we are back with our guests, Dex and Chalice. And just before we hit record, we started getting into some stuff about the differences between the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple. And I figured we should just start recording now and get into those differences, because I actually don't really know much about the differences. And Casey just learned it because he got called out.
You're all the same to my mom. She's not thrilled about this interview.
That's okay.
My mom wouldn't be either.
Yep.
So let's start there, because there's the Church of Satan and then the Satanic Temple, and let's get into where or what the differences are.
Sure. So the Church of Satan, which is the Satanist organization that I think a lot of people tend to think of when they hear Satanist, was founded by Anton LaVey in 1966. Which actually consisted of him ritualistically shaving his head and declaring 1966 as year one of Satan. He wrote the Satanic Bible, which is a collection of his, essays, observations, and rituals. Satanic Witch, which goes over, lesser magic, satanic rituals, which is a companion of the Satanic Bible, teaches about, greater magic, black masses ceremonies, and things like that. When it comes to general philosophy and COS belief, what's similar between the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple is, their views of Satan are non-theistic. When Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan, and what continues to be the belief of today, which hasn't changed since his passing, is that Satan is not a literal deity to be worshipped. He regarded Satan as the ultimate symbol of adversary, a metaphor for true rebellion. He took a lot of inspiration from Western esotericism and Crowleyan sex magic. He also drew inspiration from social theories, kind of talked about by Ayn Rand and Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right, which is basically Might is Right is like survival of the fittest. And then, of course, the Ayn Randians would be, true individual in all things. So so that's kind of where where those things begin. Their general beliefs hasn't really changed since the 60s. It's been pretty stagnant in that regard. And then Dex, if you want to kind of talk about the juxtaposition to the Satanic Temple.
Sure. Yeah. So Anton LaVey, Church of Satan, all that kind of kicked off modern non-theistic Satanism. And while a lot of it was sort of revolutionary back in 1966, it kind of grew to be dated, especially as evangelicals started to adopt Randian philosophy and integrate that into evangelicalism. It got to the point where it's kind of hard to tell a Baptist church from the Church of Satan at times in regards to some of their social beliefs. It's pretty wild to me. And so back in 2013, Malcolm, Jerry, and Lucian Greaves, who are our co-founders, established the Satanic Temple and wrote our 7 tenets. And basically what they did was they took Satanism as it was and kind of brought it into more of the modern age. So we dropped all the Ayn Rand stuff. We dropped the Might is Right crap, and the social Darwinism went by the wayside too. The views on women, which were, again, this is one of those things where back in 1966, you could say the views on women were somewhat progressive from like a misogynistic man's point of view, much as a guy like that could be progressive. And, we got rid of that crap too. And so we're more socially focused than the Church of Satan is. We have local groups called congregations, previously called chapters, which the Church of Satan does not. They used to have something called grottos, and they dumped that a long time ago. And Having been involved in the chapter/congregation system for years, I kind of get why. It's a source of constant drama, but they're also very meaningful groups. And
like church.
Yeah.
Also a source of, I feel like, I guess that's what happens when you gather a bunch of people into a room and try to unify around something. But
well, severe individualists, that that espouse beliefs of non-authoritarianism. I mean, get them to agree on something. Yeah, it's almost impossible.
It is definitely herding cats at its best, but it's also a thing that's incredibly valuable. It's a lot of people's chosen families. It's I was a chapter head and the founder of our Albany chapter years and years ago.
The church plant.
Yeah, and it was it was one of the very most rewarding things I ever have done in my life, was founding and running that group when I did. It's got new leadership now, thankfully, because it's a very, very tiring job. And Chalice ran a chapter too, and knows how hard it can be.
Yeah.
So how did you guys find your way into this? I don't know. I mean, so growing up Christian, as Casey and I did, I'm sure you know that a lot of people are born into it. Perhaps even you two were, and then you just like adopt it. But I don't feel like you run into a lot of people who like were born into, I don't know. How am I supposed to say it? The Satanic temple? Or is that just how I would refer to it? I want to do this correctly.
Satanism in general. So as far as my background, I mean, I was born and raised just generic Christian. I say generic because if you ask any one of my family members what Christianity we were, they couldn't really say. Very New Testament type Christianity, and I was born and raised in Utah, so we were very much, despite not having been brought up in the Mormon Church, I was brought up in the Mormon culture, and very much against my will and frankly the will of my parents as well. But when you live in a place that was founded by a religious group, it's impossible to escape. So I had actually turned away from Christianity at a young age, in my early teenage years, actually pre-teenage years, and just considered myself an atheist for a very long time. And when I was around 16 years old, I had read the Satanic Bible and really, really liked it. It really spoke to me in a lot of ways, but there was also some things there that I didn't necessarily either understand or didn't really jive with me all that well. So even though I had read the Satanic Witch and found a lot of the concepts in there really eye-opening, incredibly liberating in its spirit and the things it was talking about, I didn't necessarily feel the need to consider myself a Satanist at that point in time, especially since as I got older, I had met some people that were members of the Church of Satan, and I wasn't terribly crazy about them. So I figured they represented all of the Church of Satan, and I was like, yeah, no, I don't have time for them. They're nuts.
What was off-putting about them?
Terribly
too preachy.
Misogynistic. They kind of, and what I actually ended up finding out later is they definitely had some interesting ideas about the Jews and their identity.
That's another Baptist intersection point,
Yeah, they decided to take an interesting interpretation of their Satanism, and it was. That's the thing about the Church of Satan is those kind of ideas aren't frowned upon because they believe that people's political ideologies and things like that are inherently personal, and no one should dictate to them whether they're right or wrong. So that crowd tends to gravitate towards Church of Satan type Satanism. So anyhow, so again, I knew of LaVey. I was I thought he had a lot of really good ideas, but I didn't want to be a part of the Church of Satan. And then in 2014, I had heard about the Satanic Temple's offering of a Bapho-Might statue to the Oklahoma State not courthouse,
State House.
State House. Thank you. Yeah, because they had a Ten Commandment statue up at the State House, and the Bapho-Might statue was offered as a way to represent plurality, so I became very interested. I got to know people within it, looked at the tenants, looked into the founders, kind of got to know people through an old forum that doesn't exist anymore. But in the beginning, there were online forums that you could talk to other people at TST. And I've been a part ever since. I was really inspired by how the Satanic temples take and practice of Satanism 100% resonated with, the ideas that I had and the beliefs I already had. And it just clicked that the thing that I always was a Satanist, but I just didn't have a word for it yet. I didn't really have a good definition for it yet. It just completely fell in place with who I was and my beliefs. And how TST conceptualized, what Satan represents, and what the inspiration is, and took all the shittiness of the current existing Church of Satan, and kind of took that all out of there, and really evolved it for our understanding of how the world works now. That's what spoke to me, and so that's when I started my journey in Satanism, and when I finally kind of came to terms with my identity.
So it sounds like it really provided, at that point, since you were there ideologically, it provided a framework and a group and a sense of belonging and a something to get involved in.
Community.
It was my coming home.
Yeah, that's cool. Dex, what about you, man? How'd you find your way into it?
I will tell you. And then I think after that, we should probably actually define what Satanism is and what it's not.
That's my next.
Good. So, my background's different. Jewish. And one of the things I still have quite strong ties to my Jewish identity and the Jewish community in general. But, along the course of my life, I started to have trouble with the theistic beliefs that I had learned. And at a certain point realized I did not believe in the literal truth of a lot of things, that I had been taught to believe. So that kind of sent me on a spiritual journey of sorts, where I started looking to other major world religions. I looked at Islam and Hinduism and stuff like that, and just kind of, I don't even want to say dabbled, but just researched, and then kind of fell into sort of a loosey-goosey form of neo-paganism or something, just kind of oh, well, maybe there's something out there, but it's not a theistic deity. It's these, smaller deities, or, some kind of polytheism. And it was neat. I thought it was pretty cool, but at a certain point I realized I didn't believe in that either. So it left me spiritually afloat, and it left me without any sort of religious community, which, it turns out that even for atheists and agnostic people can be a very important thing, and not for all, of course, but I was one of those people apparently where that kind of community was something I needed. And this is where my story starts to become a little more like Chalice's. I read the Satanic Bible, same kind of reaction to it. There was parts I thought were really moving and important, and then there was parts where I'm like, well, I could certainly do without the social Darwinism. That's completely debunked social science and blah blah blah. So I started to hear about the Satanic Temple around the same time Chalice did, but I didn't get involved at that point. It was the next year. It was 2015, and that July 25th, they had the unveiling of our famous Bapho-Might statue at a big shindig in Detroit. And so that's the thing that got me seriously looking at the tenets and stuff like that, and the other things the Satanic Temple had been working on. And so it was a week after the Bapho-Might unveiling in Detroit that I decided to join. And so I joined in 2016 when they opened the headquarters in Salem. I went and took a tour of that, and that inspired me to get involved in, at that time, the closest chapter was the one in New York City. So I was a member of that for a while. And at a certain point, when I felt like I knew enough about what was going on to try my hand at it, I decided to try to form a chapter in Albany, New York, where I'm from, and it still exists today, years and years later.
What kind of membership is in a chapter like that?
So different chapters, or they're now called congregations, but we always lapse into chapters, Chalice and I, because we've been at,
we're dinosaurs. Yeah.
Yeah, we're dinosaurs. I mean, in TST world, we're like, yeah, it's like a geological age we've been involved. There's very few people left in TST who are active now that were active when we started.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. And we've served, both of us, in multiple leadership positions, beyond the chapter level. But as far as the membership, so different congregations have different structures. Some of them are statewide, like Missouri. We have some that are regional within state, like Northern California or Southern California. We've got nation or continent-wide ones, like Australia. So the membership levels really depend on how they're structured. So at its height, before pandemic, Albany had about 150 members, which for a city of 90,000 people is a pretty impressive number. We're down to around 50 now because we had to restructure and COVID knocked a lot of participation out. But we sprung back to 50 pretty quickly, and we've got a list of applications about 260 long to get through, people who want to join.
Okay, so the
Nice.
membership's an application process.
It definitely is, yeah. So you can join the Satanic Temple by filling out an online form, but joining a congregation is definitely more involved than that because there's risk involved.
You got to shake out the, Chalice's old friends.
Yeah.
The Varg Vikernes types.
Oh, Varg, if he would just continue doing karate in the backwoods of France and nothing else, it would be fine. It's unfortunate that he's just a terrible fucking person.
He sucks.
Videos. I miss that YouTube channel. Just him going fucking nuts doing karate in the woods.
And he did those videos with his
Norwegian
son,
Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Was it his son or his daughter? He does those ridiculous, like, medieval videos with.
Oh, it's one of the kids. Those were actually kind of cute, but
but still a piece of shit.
Still a piece of shit, a horrendous piece of shit.
I had to look this guy up. I don't know really anything about him, but he sounds like he's worth a Wikipedia search.
Old school black metal guy. Yeah. Didn't he go to prison for murder at one point?
Yes, yeah, he killed his bandmate.
And then came out and started talking about white supremacy at some point. I don't know.
Yeah, he's really fucking racist.
Yeah, he's incredibly racist. Yeah. It's man, it's sad.
So you can't be a religion or an organization or really anything without having a couple of people attached who graft themselves to it that are people you don't want affiliating yourselves with.
I don't think he identifies as that anymore, does he?
Varg was never considered a Satanist. I guess he was considered a Satanist in the fact that he did belong to that, black metal subculture and, decided to burn a few churches down. But he never identified as a Satanist at all. So again, he was Satanized, by society, and he obviously embraced that. But was never a Satanist. He is really actually into, I think last I knew, he was like really into paganism, and he's really into he's basically a scholar, like a Norse mythology scholar. He had a lot of time in prison to do something, so he kind of became a scholar in his own right. But
I was gonna say he's more of one of those like Celtic Thor's hammer necklace guys.
Yeah.
He's the one that takes all the Norse mythology and makes it racist. Yeah, he's one of those assholes.
Hey, look, you said that's like one of those crossover points with Baptist churches. I think one of the things that's not a crossover point is I'm guessing the Satanic Temple doesn't have like a hidden list of pedophiles that they've been shuffling around.
Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah,
so that's a feather in your cap.
Yeah,
maybe even two.
It's great. And generally in Satanism, and that's, I guess that's another thing that I guess, COS and TST have in common is that, the very idea of causing harm, especially to children, is just the worst thing. It's just not like that. So it's written, it's written in our tenets. It's written in, our laws. Like culturally, it's just one of those. It's never been anything we've ever had a problem with. you had the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s and all the accusations coming out of there saying that, Satanists were pedophiles and, there were, abortion rings and everything like that. Honestly, those accusations were merely projections by those who were who making the accusations, because come to find out, those who were the most afraid of the Satanists doing it, they were the ones who were actually doing abhorrent things like that. The Catholic Church, you look at now the Baptist Church, and
turns out evangelicals like to call everybody pedophiles that they don't like.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a liberal? You're a pedophile. Pedophile ring going all around. It's like, maybe find new material. Maybe stop with that accusation.
Yeah, it's completely antithetical to Satanism in general. So
So Satanism. Let's get into what it is before we take this thing off the rails too much. You said 7 tenets, right?
So I guess to kind of give a foundation, so we can go over the 7 tenets of the Satanic Temple. I'll let Dex kind of talk about those, but Satanism, generally speaking, across the board, Satanism is a non-theistic religious philosophy. It's centered around the literary character of Satan as kind of like the Promethean hero, who's like a hero villain who has done good, but only by performing an overreaching or rebellious act. So the key term there is literary character. So the majority of Satanists don't believe in Satan as a literal deity. Satan is more of a metaphorical representation of the eternal rebel, best exemplified by authors like, Milton and the romantic Satanists of, from Blake to Shelley and Anatole France. So Satan is also known throughout various cultures as the light bringer, the adversary, bringer of knowledge, things like that. So not only is Satan kind of a literary symbol of rebellion against arbitrary authority, it's also emblematic of personal liberation and the pursuit of knowledge. So, if you look at the history of Satan, you'll find that there are a lot of different interpretations of what Satan is, whether it's a literal malevolent being that tempts humanity into sin, or is more of an abstract idea of human adversaries. So Satan can represent many things to different people, but for us, if we look at the most widely known story of Satan being the angel that defies God's tyranny and brings enlightenment to humanity, Satan is, then becomes the ultimate representation of that rebellious human spirit that embraces outsider status and enlightenment, alignment era values such as knowledge by means of logic and evidence, personal liberty, progress, things like that. So taking that entire concept of what Satan is, you can kind of understand why Satan would be that representation of our philosophy and core beliefs. So, so at the center of that, the Satanic Temple was founded, by Malcolm Jerry and Lucian Greaves. And, they wrote the 7 tenets that are the tenets of which we contextualize our general philosophical beliefs. And Dex, if you want to kind of go into those a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if you want me to read them verbatim or kind of broad stroke them for you.
Go ahead and broad strokes.
Broad strokes. All right. So, so the first one basically says that you should act with empathy and compassion toward all creatures in accordance with reason. The second one, the struggle for justice is ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Third one, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. Our fourth one, this one's a little contentious sometimes. It's about respecting the freedoms of others. And right in smack dab in the middle of it, it has, I'll have to read it out, the whole thing, to make sense. The freedom of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. That's the part that gets contentious. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of others is to forego one's own. And I can come back to why that one's contentious if you haven't figured it out already.
I want to get into it. I think that sounds like a fun conversation. And I have some ideas of where it's going to go. But
yeah. The fifth one is about basing your worldview on the most accurate and up-to-date scientific knowledge of the world, as opposed to, distorting reality to fit your own personal beliefs. Sixth one's about, people's personal fallibility and making amends if you make mistakes. And our last one kind of loops them all together. Is basically reminds you that every tenet is designed to inspire nobility in thought and action. and that compassion and wisdom should prevail over the written and spoken word. I like that one. I kind of feel like it ties the other ones all together. And the purpose of these, they're meant to be interpreted person by person. They're meant to be individually interpreted. So different people will interpret them differently. But the important thing is they're all supposed to work hand in hand. So, it's not supposed to be where you cherry pick one on Monday and the next one, on Tuesday, or you're having a bad day. So you're going to ignore the one about empathy and compassion. They're supposed to all inform each other. So as far as the fourth tenet goes, there's a tendency among some people to focus in on just the words freedom to offend. And I have to constantly remind people, we don't have a tenet called freedom to offend. And that if you read the tenet in its totality, it's about respecting the freedoms of others. So what's up with the offense? This is the part where people, I call them fourth tenet Satanists, will just take those three words in isolation and decide that that's their license to be a total piece of shit, which doesn't get them far in our community. In reality, what it's supposed to be about, there's a difference between offense and harm. So me being a Satanist is offensive. Me being queer is offensive to people. Me being polyamorous is offensive to people. But none of these things are harming anybody.
I'm about to hang up.
So that's sort of more what the intent of it is. It's protecting things like authentic living and blasphemy, which is a big part of a lot of people's satanic practice, stuff of that nature. It's not meant to be a license to create harm.
Yeah, it's funny because even as soon as I heard it, I didn't even necessarily. I can understand why it would go that way. I honestly, even thinking about things from thinking about it the way our political engagement works, where everyone's constantly bothered by something that someone else sends. There's always like a contentious argument around what free speech is and things like that. But it does kind of feel like the idea is that your behavior or actions may be offensive to somebody, and honestly, sometimes you just have to deal with that, right? I mean, you can't control how other people always feel about it. And I think even thinking about it in regards to Satanism, and correct me if I go off base here at all, but it does have even Satanism has a contentious feel to it to a lot of people. That's an offensive idea to a lot of Christians. Almost by nature, its development is a counter to whatever was the dominant religion, right? Yes, no, am I on the right track?
No, I would say that's true.
Okay. So it developing as a counter to that is, almost a deliberate act of offense towards, as you maybe put it earlier, right, Chalice, you said arbitrary
authority, yeah.
Yeah, arbitrary authority, which is like, why should it be Christianity? Why do I have to subject myself to this? So I think to me, I hear it, I'm like, yeah, it sounds reasonable. Like, you can go about your business, and if someone's bothered by it, like, sometimes, not that there aren't things that are bothersome or troubling that you should call out, but also just like, you do get to exist in this world simultaneously as somebody else, even if they don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, one of the things that I've heard and continue to hear a lot from, because I live in Kansas, so I'm surrounded by Christian conservatives all the time. And, one of the things that you hear a lot from the ones that are finally having to come to terms on things like homosexuality and all, non-conforming identities by, antique standards and stuff is like, people can do whatever they want. Just I don't want to hear about it. Like, that's a thing that you hear. I mean, Sam, you had to be in this. You've heard that before, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, of course.
Where it's like, I know gay people are out there and stuff, but you don't need to have a parade through the middle of Wichita. And it's like this constant thing of like, I'm allowing you to exist, but I don't want to see it. I don't want you to talk about it. I don't want it to be visible. Just do your thing, and don't, the fact that I have to be confronted with it at all means that it's offensive, and it's like being shoved down my throat or something like that.
That's how a lot of people feel. And, I guess we would say the same in that, why are we having to hide ourselves and not talk about who we are when, we find the things they do out in the open just as offensive as they find us? Like, why is them being out openly, without question, without shame, without anything like that being
They
shoved
don't have
down
shame.
our throats. Why is that acceptable while the rest of us have to stay in our closets? Part of being a Satanist is embracing that outsider status. We inherently know that whether it's the way we look, whether it is our beliefs, whether it is our identity, any element of who we are as people, goes against, what the acceptable, common, societal, way to be is. And, we already know we're an outsider based on these things, but, as a Satanist, to call oneself a Satanist is to embrace it. And for that to be a badge of honor and not be something we consider to be a badge of shame. So, yeah.
My favorite tenet is number 2. I thought that one was that was my favorite one.
Huh?
My favorite tenet, I really like number 2. That one's resonated with me.
Yeah.
The struggle for justice one.
Yeah, and just like I forget you. I like the way you said it. I don't remember if exactly what it was, but it's just something about the institutional powers. It doesn't matter. Just because there's an institution or a power that says you have to do one thing or another, it's just says.
Well,
who?
and
It's almost anarchist in a way.
Well, we're seeing that pretty much because, there is an understanding that just because something is quote unquote legal doesn't necessarily mean it's right or moral. And and we're seeing that a lot with how currently in June of 2022, we are looking at a Supreme Court that is starting to erode away, people's rights, whether they're people that, have uteruses, whether it's anybody that belongs to the LGBTQ plus community, whether it's the Supreme Court or the states or a combination thereof, things are being put into law that is making our existence illegal. It is making our existence basically a death sentence. And, part of that tenet says, this is a struggle that we're continuously going to have to fight. It is, we understand it's institutionalized. This isn't just something where it's just in one small sector and, could easily avoid it. It's from the ground up and it's from the top down. And, we should do everything we can to, fight against that, because that inherently is at the core center of the spirit of Satan and what Satan represents, the eternal rebel. The reason we know of this Satan character and the Satan character we all know, across all cultures is that inherent defiance against God. And, it was a struggle and ultimately, as the saying goes, I'd rather serve in hell than reign in heaven, or reign in hell than serve in heaven. And it's that pretty much is at the core of the things that we do, like in our activism and the things that we do every day as Satanists to try and push back against those laws and institutions. And because at the heart of it, that's where the act of Satanism is. At least for me, it is outside of the personal practice of my Satanism.
So I have a question for you about the going back to the offense fourth tenet issue. So I was when we were getting ready for the episode, I watched there was a piece that Vice did about the Satanic Temple protesting, basically supporting abortion rights. And I don't know is that something you guys have seen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this video, they're talking about they're standing up for abortion rights, and they're kind of confronting a pro-life protest that's happening outside of I don't know if it was outside of a Planned Parenthood or something like that, but they're all in some of them are dressed as babies and some of them are dressed as priests and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to where it's got to be difficult to determine where is offense, is it valuable, where is it a distraction, And is there like a lot of debate back and forth between, within your organization about whether or not like, hey, is this the right approach, or do we need to come as a less in your face and more of I'm not sure. I'm struggling to find words here.
Yeah, no, I think I understand where you're going with that. So you're referencing the Vice video that documented the BDSM baby protest and the mother's milk protest actions, and those were done kind of in TST's infancy. That was a very early on, and those were led by the Detroit chapter. Well, yeah, the Detroit chapter way back when. This was years ago. And when it came to how the Satanic Temple did its tried to get the message across, it's very much different now than it was in the beginning. Those things were performance art pieces, done by that local group. They were intended to be shocking. They were intended to point out the fetishization of, people that see fetuses, the fetishization of the fetus, and, the absolute denial of the humanity of the person, the pregnant person. And, pointing out a lot of the hypocrisy, pointing out a lot, so through art, through these performance pieces, that was the message that was trying to get across. Now, for some people, that is how their activism works. That's how they want to do their activism. They feel it's important that through art they point out these things, and that they through shock and through confronting these people with a really intense vision of what it is they're doing to people trying to just obtain healthcare. They think that that's the starting off point to making change. Some people are like that, and we had a lot of that in the beginning, but it's really shifted in the Satanic Temple. You actually don't see these things anymore. That was kind of like the early era, the experiment, the what is TST? How is TST going to bring these fights, and how are we going to demonstrate and have effective activism? And so the shift kind of began when we realized that those things where you can appreciate the message, you can think it's really funny, or just being like, yeah, like, how does it feel for you guys to have everything that you are put in your face, where we're actually making a point, you guys are just harassing people trying to obtain healthcare. It's we kind of went away from that, and instead we've been focusing more on protecting people's rights legally, because what we found is that being splashy, being in the news, and people talking about us for 5 minutes, it doesn't really do much. Like, what is the actual change? What is the actual outcome of that? Well, you're in the news for 5 minutes and then nobody cares anymore. Nothing changes. There's no tangible outcome that actually benefits the fact that we are losing our rights. And so now we're focusing more on the legal actions, focusing more on affirming that we are a protected religious minority group, and that our tenets and our identity as Satanists, we hold certain truths to be absolute, and one of those is our right to bodily autonomy, and that no law and institution should infringe upon that right. And that if there's anything about what we do in our religious practice that is infringed upon, i.e. the ability to obtain an abortion, for example, we should be protected. Our religious rights to do so should be protected. So that's why we have that's why we have the Religious Reproductive Rights Campaign, focusing on the things we can actually do to protect our rights. So whether that's having forms to represent at the clinic saying, I am exempt, because of RFRA. We should be exempt from, certain things, being forced to see ultrasounds, being forced to consider state propagated propaganda to try to elicit an emotional response from us, and pushing completely scientifically invalid information on us to try and shame us into not obtaining medical care, waiting periods, and there are even laws that are saying after a certain amount of time you're no longer allowed to the right to your bodily autonomy. We're fighting back and saying no, you cannot limit that because it is an infringement on our religious rights. And it's a byproduct of this country and the laws and institutions that were created to benefit religious people over non-religious or anybody else. Now, they were created to benefit one particular religious identity over the other, but and we're kind of actually through a lot of our legal battles kind of demonstrating that when they say religious liberty for all, they really only mean religious liberty for one, religious liberty for only one small sect, and the rest of you need not apply. So the things that we are discovering in the legal system is even though legally speaking in legal theory, we have everything squarely in our corner, there's no reason why any judge would find against us. They're finding ways to do it, and it's simply because we're Satanists, because we're not the right religion to be protected. We are not the right kind of people to be protected under the laws that they've wrote and they put in there to protect and give them superiority over others. So so I don't know if that answered your question, but basically, there was a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the beginning, but we've definitely changed methodologies, and we've definitely kind of changed our scope of what's effective, what actually has a tangible outcome, and what'll actually protect our members.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because there's so much that you look at from the outside and you're like, is this about changing the result? Like, is this about winning the result that you want, or is this about, is this like a masturbatory sort of action? You know what I mean? And like, I get that there's also a learning curve there. So that's not to say that like there's, there was any ill intentions by the people in that video, but I really think that's great. The change in tactics. I also, like you talked about, protecting the religious status of one group over another. And that goes, that argument goes so much further than even religion. And it's funny you were talking about that. I was thinking about how many times I've had this conversation with, friends of mine who are Christian or just conservative in general. It's funny how many really conservative, non-religious people seem to have like this sort of reverence for Christianity when it comes to like keeping something that they don't like out of the public conversation or out of law. But, liberty means more than just the right to live as a good Christian. And I think that's something that like, doesn't always get talked about enough, but it is funny how many times, like whether we're talking about, abortion rights or marijuana is another one that like you hear over and over again, that same argument where you're like, yeah, but it's not good for people. And dude, people are on so many different things. And I just think that like, it's not right for us to live that way. And it says in the Bible, isn't that and the other. Like, look, man, that's all great and all, but I don't have the rights to live as, the type of person that the Bible dictates is good. Like, liberty means living the way that I want to and pursuing happiness and fulfillment as long as it doesn't interfere with yours.
Yeah, and I think that gets forgotten, and nobody is saying that if you are Christian, if you are conservative, if those are your beliefs and those are the things that you hold true to yourself, nobody is saying that you don't have the right to have those beliefs and have those beliefs inform your decisions and what you do in your life. Those are your values, and you should be free to live your values, so long as you're not causing harm to other people. That's always the caveat, right? But the problem is that that's not the reality we live in. The reality we live in is when you have this moral absolutism of, I am so right and everything I believe is the right way, that I need to live in a society where everyone, is the same way, whether it's motivated by wanting everyone and love to benefit from the thing that is absolutely true, and wanting everyone to be in paradise and not suffer, whether that's your motivation or you're just a fucking fascist asshole. It's like whatever the motivation is, it's the fact that they're using their morals, their beliefs, and their forcing that on others that do not adhere to those. That's when the problems begin. But that's the reality we live in. We don't live in a society where the freedom of thought, the freedom of choice, the freedom of your what your morals are, and your personhood, the freedom to your personhood in general. That's being stripped away, and they're creating a society that fits their ideals and their morals, and it also keeps them in privilege, right? Not to go on like too much of a tangent, but we've got the Supreme Court decisions that are coming down left and right. We will be looking at a world where Roe v. Wade will be overturned, which is a right to privacy, which has a domino effect that it actually is not going to stop at abortion or anything like that. So we're just seeing this erosion of the separation of church and state. We're seeing this erosion of these people that have these conservative beliefs not interfering with the ability of other people with how they live. It's this really is just a rage, that this rage of a dying privilege, right? You've got these white Christian conservative men seeing their power diminished. They're seeing their status as the dominant class in America just completely going away. And this is their way of trying to reclaim that privilege. They're turning to lifetime appointments in an unchecked branch of government to retain and reclaim that status and privilege. And it's partly they're seeing their pews emptying, they're seeing their labor force dwindling, they're seeing people of color ascend to equal status, they're seeing gender and sexuality no longer being confined to the binary. They're not, they're seeing this world change as a product of people evolving in a society, just evolving its understanding of things, and they're absolutely terrified. But their absolute terror should not, I feel like they should go be afraid in their own homes and not be infringing upon my rights. But clearly that's not the case. So here we are.
It's liberty for me and not for thee.
Yeah, they've enjoyed the privilege for. I say they, like I'm not a white guy on this conversation, but it's like that privilege has existed for so long that the erosion of it feels like it's unconscionable. It's like we can't. The irony is that there's such a resistance to admit or believe that there's inequalities in this country, but their feeling of being equalized is like setting them on a path to burn the whole thing down. And it's like, so you're like, the fear of what it would be like to be in that position is enough to make you go on these tirades, but you're still unwilling or unable to admit that this has existed. And it's definitely cognitive dissonance. It's becoming quite clear.
I think it's just a worldview. It's your view of the natural order of things diminishing and fading away, and I don't know. I guess it's shocking for him. It's also really comforting to look around at like all of the chaos that exists in the world and be able to just blame it on concrete things that never change for you. Well, the erosion of the family and and fathers in the home and blah 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 blah. It's easy to point complex problems that are hard to find legislative and such solutions for, and just say, well, what do you expect when you got people doing this and that and the other? It's a cop out. It's a comforting cop out for people who don't know what to do and don't know how to act to counteract the problems that we're all trying to figure out, I think.
Dex, I have a question for you about your Jewish identity and roots, because I was curious about it when you were talking about your shift into Satanism, but that you still obviously have a connection to your Jewish heritage. I feel like I've learned a lot in the past 4, 5, 6 years about the Jewish community, and obviously it's not monolithic, but just growing up Christian and having a very Christian understanding of the Bible and finding some of their interpretations of their scriptures to be really interesting and nothing like I got in conservative evangelicalism. And honestly, oftentimes metaphorical, oftentimes shifting meanings or more duality, or so it seems like there's a space in the Jewish community for people who have all these the same ideologies as you, and that don't even subscribe to the idea of a traditional, God traditionally, and more of a concept in the way that Satan's a concept. And obviously my understanding is that seems to work better there because of how cultural Judaism is versus Christianity. Often evangelicalism particularly it's the set of ideas that you assent to. So I'm curious as to do you know people in the Jewish community in your Jewish community that you have a lot of shared ideals with and similar viewpoints on things and even understandings of, the existence of a deity? But what was it that felt like your pull was into the Satanic Temple versus finding similar ideology and a kind of a way forward in Judaism?
I think ultimately I found myself uncomfortable with the idea of cosmic principles in general. And so interesting, and you've touched on some of this already accurately, I would say, Jewish interpretations of the Hebrew Bible, or as Christians call it, the Old Testament, are often wildly different from how Christians interpret it. There's a Orthodox rabbi I talk to regularly, and he ran a class, an interfaith class, and in the course of that class, one of the attendees who was Pentecostal asked about, young Earth creationism. And the rabbi's like, well, of course it didn't take 5,000 something years. We have geological evidence that it didn't. He's like, well, the Bible says, he's like, well, the Bible is largely metaphorical. And this was an Orthodox rabbi. This wasn't some loosey-goosey New Age, Reconstructionist rabbi that, is trying to be so open-minded their brain fell out or something. This was a fairly traditional Orthodox rabbi. He had another great quote that I loved. He asked the class, who here is an atheist? And I raised my hand. And he said, what don't you believe in? And he later admitted he was trying to pick a fight, not like a fight, but like an intellectual sparring match that I didn't help him with much. And I was like, the sky guy, with the beard and shit up in the clouds. He's like, well, I don't believe in that either. And he's like, you know what God is? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, God is the sum total of the forces of the universe over which humanity has no control. He's like, asteroids crashing to Earth. What can you do about that? I'm like, not much. He's like, there you go. And so he started giving all these examples of things. He's like, and these things are God. And he pointed out, he said, you can be a perfectly observant Orthodox Jew and be completely agnostic on the existence of a sentient God. And it was interesting because it was one of those things where it just kind of poked holes in my own understanding of my own background. There's a lot of ignorant Christians out there, and there's equally as many ignorant Jews out there who don't know their own religion well at all. You've got your biannual Christians that go to church on Christmas and Easter, and then the rest of the year they just do whatever the fuck they feel like. And there's Jews that only go to synagogue on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. So both religions have their adherents of different levels of adhesion, I guess is where I was going. So the question was, why did I go towards Satanism? Well, I think ultimately I was still not sold on the necessity of observing the mitzvot, the commandments. And by commandments, I don't mean the 10 commandments. Jews don't actually call those commandments. The commandments for Jews are things like, keeping kosher and not working on the Sabbath and things like that, which I guess that one is one of the 10 commandments. But anyway, and feeling like, well, why should I have to do all these things? Like if I don't think there's a sentient God that exists that handed down scripture, then why do all these things? So, it was that kind of thing. So I didn't have like some hard break the way that a lot of Christians do, where they like have to unlearn all kinds of mythology that's very supernatural in nature. I didn't have to go through any of that, really. It was more of a gentle, like, well, I was agnostic and now I'm atheist and I don't feel like, not eating bacon kind of thing.
Yeah, like you didn't even connect to that. Like some people connect to it as like a practice and a grounding thing, and you weren't even connecting to it in that way at all.
I wasn't, which is funny because in the years since then, I've reconnected with some of that stuff. I still don't, not eat pork or stuff like that, but I do actually attend synagogue sometimes and stuff like that and observe some of the holidays in my own humanistic way. And there is actually a very large and growing humanistic Judaism movement, which is, a non-theistic religion like Satanism, where they just keep the cultural aspects without any of the supernaturalism. And so I sort of dual identify. And if I'm not mistaken, Malcolm Jerry, one of our co-founders, also has a dual identity as a humanistic Jew and a Satanist. There's a lot of crossover between the two. Some of the very specifics are obviously different, but the general gist of, we want a religious community with shared ethos and shared symbolism and stuff like that, shared values. There's a ton of crossover between them. And humanistic Judaism, like contemporary non-theistic Satanism, is very, for the most part, progressive. It's very science-oriented. There's a tremendous amount of crossover between the two. So I'm very comfortable dual identifying, and that's as a minister in the Satanic Temple. So yeah, it's kind of been like a bit of a back and forth more than a linear progression in one way. But I'm still more comfortable identifying as a Satanist because I think that's slightly more in line with my overall worldview than yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It makes total sense. I was just, as I've learned more, I was curious as to how that worked for you. It's funny too, because even as within Christianity, I think that type of thing I think it's always existed in, small spaces and on the fringe of Christianity, but even within it, it's like the similar idea of God, like that agnosticism within Christianity is like, this is a framework. This is a way that I kind of balance my life and find, because I still even identify with Christianity, but in a way that it's, I feel like even the things you're talking about and the tenets that you guys have taken the time to explain and the ethos of Satanism, it's like, there's no rub there. Like that just means, I feel like that's almost at the core of humanism and what it means to be human. So I think it's neat, and it just kind of comes with it's that it feels anarchist to me. It's probably stupid or petty, but it's just like, maybe it's not, but it's just like that pushing against it because why? Like, why is this the way that it is? So I like that. And I hear what you're saying and the way that you've kind of like bounced back and forth. I've never really like bounced back and forth in the same way as far as finding an identity in something different, but I have intellectually and I guess spiritually, if that's even the right way to put it, would be like, totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I use the term spiritual even while describing non-theistic Satanism sometimes as just, that sense of wonderment and stuff like that. Yeah. That sense of ecstasy and awe as you like behold something, that's kind of beyond human comprehension, pondering the universe or the existence potentially of AI or things like that, these kinds of like real, like they're talking about the Google one, that they think might actually have become sentient. And
I've been hearing about that.
Yeah, like I guess it had this like really indignant reaction to the idea of being used in experiments without consent, and I'm like, God damn, like we're getting pretty damn close to, what's our brain other than a bunch of electrical signals being interpreted by a blob of fat floating in darkness. So how different is that from artificial consciousness? But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But
I know.
So for me, when I say yeah, so spiritual but not theistically so.
Where do the reptiles that tell Hunter Biden where to get his laptop fixed fit into your theology?
It's the very heart of it, my friend.
Yeah. We're all about those reptilians.
Yep.
We were like, so Sam and I were both born in, you're born in 87, right?
88, baby.
88. Little fella. So by the time we were like old enough to pay attention, like the Satanic Panic had really fizzled out in all reasonable circles. But, it kind of still existed in urban legends, and there was still this kind of like ominous, talk of satanic rituals and Satanism and devil worship and all of that kind of stuff. Like, I gotta imagine that embracing the, Satan is kind of like a figurehead within your community and your viewpoint and stuff like that. Like, you have to contend with those ideas even still on a pretty frequent basis. Like, do you run into that a lot? Like, how annoying is that, and how often do you have to deal with like the Midwestern dad who's throwing away his kids' metal albums interpretation of Satan and Satan?
Well, considering somebody just tried to burn our headquarters down, it is one of those things where when you identify with a character such as Satan, I wouldn't say that it's necessary for us to accept those kinds of things, especially since we do a lot of work making sure that people understand who we are and who we aren't. We're not perpetuating those stereotypes. They're just not bothering to learn that they are stereotypes and that they're completely false. We put the information out there. We do everything we can to make sure people understand who we are, what we do, but most importantly, who we're not. It's people's unwillingness to learn, to be open to learning, openness to be wrong about their preconceptions, and and how they decide to act upon their fear and misinformation and concepts of who we are based on nothing but, Satanic Panic era ideas of who we are. That's on them. That's their responsibility, not ours. But yeah, they do kind of make it our problem. A lot of people still, use pseudonyms because, it's, some people, we've known people who've been fired because their identities were outed as Satanists. Our headquarters, somebody like recently did an arson attack against our headquarters and actually themselves said it was a hate crime and that the Satanists have to be obliterated. We deal with this all the time. Recently in Idaho, I'm sure you guys saw the news about that group of white supremacists who got caught, on their way to a pride event in Coeur d'Alene. Some of our people were going to be there, and so this idea of devil worship, pedophilia, this idea that we believe in a literal Satan and we do these horrific acts as Satanists, is something that continues to be perpetuated no matter what we do. It's perpetuated in people that believe in those things and in kind of what I pointed out earlier, people that are just projecting on the things that they themselves do. They definitely make that our problem. There was an instance a few years ago when I was still the director of the After School Satan Club where I had been doxxed by a family member who was very upset about what I was doing. And this person got a hold of that information, found me, showed up at my house, and they had a 9mm on hand. They were intent on killing me.
Holy shit.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I wish I was joking. So that happened because their belief was that I was there to indoctrinate children into Satanism and use them for my sick. And and this is all the span. This has all been within the last, that happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
How did you even handle that? I'm curious about that. I mean, did you de-escalate?
Did you have to kill him?
No, I just I noticed when I was driving home. I lived in a really weird area where a main street was the street that led on to, where my front door was. And I was getting home at a particularly late part of the night where nobody should be loitering around. And just noticed somebody was kind of walking in around my door. They were kind of checking to, see who was coming and seeing if they recognized anybody who's walking up and down the street. And it was really odd. And I just had one of those things where I was like, this doesn't look right. So I thought, I'm just going to drive up the street around the corner and then come back. Maybe they'll leave. But no, he stayed there. So one of the few times I felt the necessity, because I lived on my own at that point. So I just had to call the police and say, there's this guy here, and here's what's going on. And originally I'd called and said, can I have somebody just escort me into my house? This person's not leaving. I don't feel comfortable like confronting them and asking them to go away. They seem like they know where they're at, and they seem like they're waiting for me to come home. And at that time I had been dealing with a restraining order against an ex-partner. So I thought, actually, that's kind of what I thought was the case. I thought this has something to do with my ex, whom I have a restraining order against. So then they sent a police officer, and he got in cuffs pretty quickly. And then it turned out that he was there. He had a 9mm on hand, and he was going to show me exactly how he felt about me teaching Satanism to kids, which I wasn't.
Jesus.
But
oh my word,
that's terrifying.
What did he get in trouble for? So did he admit to all that?
Yeah, he totally admitted to it, and that's the thing. I mean, we saw that in the case with the recent arsonist. I mean, they're committing arson, attempted murder, things like that. They see those things as completely justified. They have no reason to not admit to what their intent was or what their actions were, because they're like, no, I mean, they deserve it. Like, I'm not doing anything wrong. So, I'll completely admit to what I did, but, I know what I'm doing is right. So why would I lie about that?
It's almost like an act of terrorism. Like he had a point to make with violence. Yeah.
He said even like, if a few people got harmed on the inside, like, it's basically a small price to pay. He showed up wearing a gray shirt that just said God on it, which is
the arsonist did. Yeah.
And then I just want to point out this other piece about it because it's so dumb. Police also said he left his backpack on the temple's porch with a copy of the U.S. Constitution, 2 sticks, lighter fluid, and a Bible.
Talk about, he committed, he did one of the most satanic thing ever, which is burn a Bible. He burned his own Bible, which is ironic.
And his favorite book, the Constitution. That's even better, isn't it? No way he doesn't like the Bible more than the Constitution.
I'm sure he's as well versed in the Constitution as the Bible he seems to think he knows all about. So
the document that ironically gives you guys the right to do your own shit in your own time in your own place.
But devil. Yeah.
So, yes, to answer your question, yes, this is something we still very much deal with. And, it seems like people are getting more and more emboldened to act upon their fear and their inability to listen to us and listen to anybody who knows anything about who we are. They just want to believe that we are the evil in the world because, maybe because they can't confront the evil within. So we get to pay the price for that. So it'll be interesting to see how the next, couple of years go.
They're just excited about fighting that physical warfare and not having to keep it on the spiritual plane, I guess.
Yeah, well.
I feel like if you have to protect yourself, I think one of those squiggly daggers would be a good choice for a Satanist.
Well, unless they're carrying an AR, then it doesn't really do much. You just look cool when you're dying.
Sometimes that's all you can ask for.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say, we're getting to bits, but at least you got some cool bling to go down with.
My house is an arsenal.
Is there an increase in that? Because I feel like Alex Jones has made Satanic Panic stuff cool again. If
Yeah, I think anyone who subscribes to any kind of conservative evangelical ideology, satanic panic's always been. I just think they now feel more emboldened to act upon it, whereas maybe before, maybe like 5 years ago, maybe not so much. But I mean, it's definitely evidence, considering you've got these Proud Boys and other white supremacy groups. I mean, it's not just Satanists. I mean, it's anybody that is not a white conservative Christian male. If you're not that, anything that makes you different than that is now becoming a death sentence for you. So whether you're BIPOC, whether you're LGBTQ+, whether you belong to a religious minority, if you're a woman, or gender nonconforming, whatever the case may be, if you're not this specific thing, that thing that sets you apart is definitely going to be the thing that they're going to use as justifiable to end your life or cause harm on you. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing more of that. They keep showing up to to libraries. They keep, they're showing up to pride things. I mean, it's just, I think it's going to get worse.
The emboldening is certainly increasing. The trajectory is not looking great right now. Now go ahead and throw a disastrous economy on top of that and see how much people act like complete psychopaths.
Yeah, that always brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
Yep. On that note.
Yeah, that's encouraging. So, you talked about like the fact that you've got a list of applicants that you've got to piece through. So, what's the culling process look like? I mean, it sounds like you don't exactly have like open membership available to anyone who wants to show up. I mean, you guys are you kind of sorting through the list to find people who, definitely adhere to the same principles and not just like, the idea of upsetting their parents or something like that?
Yeah. So like I said, if you want to just join the Satanic Temple, you just go to the website and do it. It takes like 2 seconds and it's free. But that doesn't give you a whole ton of privileges. It basically just gets you on a mailing list and it's usually a prerequisite for joining a congregation. So what we look for in Albany is we have a fairly robust application, and we ask people to explain their understanding of what Satanism is, to explain what they understand about the Satanic Temple, things of that nature. And we're looking for people who have done at least a bare minimum amount of work to understand what Satanism is, what the Satanic Temple is, to basically give us some evidence that they abide more or less by our tenets. You don't have to necessarily be a self-identified Satanist to join, but if you want to have any sort of like leadership position or anything like that, then yes, you would absolutely have to be a Satanist. So what ends up happening is a lot of people show up for the activism and stay for the religion. That's a kind of a very common experience, I think, especially after that Hail Satan documentary came out. The Hail Satan documentary was good and bad. We love to hate it. And the reason for that is it gave an okay historical arc of the Satanic Temple, but kind of left out all the religion. And while we're most known for our activism, that's really like 10% of what we do. And very few of our members are actually involved in activism. The Satanic Temple is broken down into 2 pillars. On one pillar, we have the Society of Congregations, and that's the social, religious community element of the Satanic Temple. Then our other pillar is our campaigns, like After School Satan, our Gray Faction campaign, which fights against pseudoscience and the mental health industry, and others. We have other campaigns too. So a lot of people, they come in expecting they're going to do spooky protests like the ones you mentioned earlier, which we don't do anymore. And then they find out that there's a lot more going on, and find out they like the people, that they identify with the tenets and such and such. And before you know it, people who came in saying things like, well, I'll never identify as religious, I'll never belong to an organized religion, are indeed doing both of those things, just through exposure to it. So we want to make sure that, people have a pretty decent idea of what they're trying to get into. And we want to make sure that they're not to the best of our ability, make sure they're not like dangerous, or unstable in a way that's going to create potentially harm for our members. So, we'll ask if we can see their social media accounts, to see what kinds of things they're posting. If they've got, Confederate flags and Trump stickers all over the fucking place, we're not going to let them in, because we know that that's going to make our BIPOC members or LGBTQ plus members very feel, if not be, unsafe. And our first priority is to our existing membership to keep them safe. And so, we go through, if we go through 10 applications, probably 3 of them will get in. 4 or 5 will get thrown off right off the bat, and the other 2 won't respond when we contact them. So it's,
okay.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. And then once they're in, they join our Slack channel. We used to have a Facebook group, but we got rid of it because Facebook sucks. And
we did the same thing with this podcast.
There you go. See, so yeah, because people kept losing their accounts, and the whole congregation accounts were getting shut down. People were losing their groups. Their membership was getting scattered. So it was oh my God, it was terrible. Like the entire Arizona congregation's leadership and social groups were all shut down one day, and I don't know if they've ever recouped their membership from that.
Yeah, well, plus people can send you death and rape threats, and Facebook says that doesn't violate anyone's their guidelines. So
yeah, but if you call someone a potato, you get a 30-day ban.
Yeah,
literally.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg's one of those aforementioned lizards.
He is absolutely. That guy's human skin is getting itchy, and you can tell. It's like he needs to molt.
He needs to molt.
Can I ask one more quick question before we let you guys get out of here?
Sure.
Is there like what's the hierarchy like? It sounds like it's pretty organized, and more organized than maybe I had originally guessed. Does it do all chapters have to be, they get approved? Do they all float up to the central organization? And like, how big is the central organization?
Right now, the way the congregations work is, essentially think of it as like a 2-pillar system where, you have the umbrella of the Satanic Temple. And one of the pillars that is a part of the foundations of what the Satanic Temple is the Society of Congregations. That is all of the congregations throughout the world. We're international, we're in, and those congregations have, specific guidelines they adhere to. Obviously, we want to make sure that anybody who uses the name, the Satanic Temple, obviously they adhere to the tenets, and they don't do stuff in the name of the Satanic Temple that'll be terrible. So you have these self-governing bodies that are responsible for just checking in, making sure the congregations are functioning the way they should, and acting as a source of support for growing congregations and existing ones and things like that. And then the second pillar under the general umbrella is all of our campaigns. So Great Faction, After School Satan, Protect Children, religious reproductive rights, just to name a few. We have quite a few campaigns, and those are the parts of the Satanic Temple that have a very, a very specific goal in mind. There's a mission. There's a very specific utilization of resources and what the goal of that campaign is to do. And those campaigns can actually either consist of people that identify as Satanists who are part of the Satanic Temple, or in like campaigns, I'll just throw one out, like Great Faction, where a lot of the research, a lot of the stuff that we do in tandem with mental health experts, people who have been victims of people that believe in that convinced them that they were ritualistically abused. These terrible therapists that made them believe that they were victims of satanic cults, and then of course they get out under all the drugs and all the obtrusive therapies and all the things that these people submit them to and they come out of it and realize none of it's true, they tell us their stories, and they want people to know about these specific, mental health experts that are the ones, people responsible for the trauma that they underwent. So, these campaigns have a little bit more bandwidth as far as, those who contribute, whether that's, in a professional sense or volunteers. So those are essentially the two pillars of the Satanic Temple. And they are independent, but they also work in tandem with one another. And that is essentially the meat and potatoes of the Satanic Temple. And then you have, or I guess the beyond meat and potatoes of the. And then we also have ministry. That is the part of the Satanic Temple that is responsible for ordaining our ministers. It's not necessarily it's. That kind of goes, beyond the scope of, just congregations or campaigns. Being ordained and being a minister of Satan with the Satanic Temple is open to anyone who identifies as, a Satanist with the Satanic Temple. And a lot of times they won't have a local congregation or a campaign or anything like that necessarily that they belong to. But, if they fit the requirements and they go through the process like everyone else does, they can be an ordained minister of Satan. So, again, it's not just constrained to just being a part of a congregation or being a part of a campaign. There's the ministry side of that as well. So, pretty simplistic structure. I mean, we've definitely gone through a lot of evolutions of what this looks like, especially considering, Dex and I have been around for a long time. We've seen this organization. We've been a part of it well before any councils were created, any hierarchy was created. I mean, it really was the Wild West back in the quote unquote good old days. So, we've seen TST go through a lot of iterations, a lot of evolution, and so as of right now, we've got that kind of that two pillar system.
Yeah. When I joined, we had several hundred members. We just passed 700,000 this week.
That's wild.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's called revival.
In less than a decade.
That's incredible.
You guys sending any missionaries to Papua New Guinea?
Well, no. we don't recruit. We don't proselytize. People have to come to us.
Well, see, that's another differentiating point between you and a Baptist church. And, also your stringent membership process, because we used to sing a song called Just As I Am. And we sang it at the end of every service. Mm-hmm. And we'll take anybody. That's kind of what that...
Yeah. Company's motto is more like, get your shit together.
The only requirement is that you vote for Mitt Romney in 2012,
Really vague.
As ministers of Satan, can you do weddings? Do you have to go through a solemnization process, or are you just ordained by state standards?
So we have a program through our ministry program that you have to go through to be able to officiate things like that, and then also you have to, depending on the state you're in. So you get your credentials through the Satanic Temple, and then with those credentials, I guess adhere to whatever individual weird state laws there are through that. And ministers of Satan can, and then obviously we have to renew every year. We do continuing education. We do a lot of things what we feel is really important to uphold the standards of which we have for our ministers. It depends on the state as far as like the paperwork aspect.
There's more paperwork in Alabama, I'm sure.
Yeah, but
you got to prove that you're 14.
Yeah, well, that's going away now too, isn't it? Depending on the state.
Oh Christ! Stop.
Yeah, your middle school ID will be enough soon.
Oh, Jesus.
A report card from your 5th grade teacher is going to be all you need.
Right. What was that weaselly little guy?
You don't even need
Hank's dad. What was the guy's name that was running down there? That
that old fuck. I'll just call him that old fuck. I can't remember. I know exactly. I can picture his dumb face, but I can't remember his dumb name.
He doesn't he look like Hank Hill's dad?
A little bit. Now that you mention it. The ordination. the ordination program just turned a year old, and it's pretty cool to see it continuing to grow. Chalice and I were actually some of the original developers of it, and we're both on the Ordination Council now, which administers the program and religious development in general.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man. Well, thank you both so much for joining us and kind of giving us the scoop on the Satanic Temple.
Absolutely.
I'm glad it's still there, by the way. I'm glad nothing awful happened. It was just a
nobody was
porch
hurt.
fire.
Yeah, nobody was hurt, but it's really unfortunate considering, well, the reason why it happened, but also it's a very old building. Everything was original to the house, and so it's it sucks. Yeah, it's I have a picture of the porch. I have it printed out and I have it hanging up, and it's my it's my reminder to keep going, to keep doing what we do, because clearly it's really important. And
yeah. Well, as someone who lives in Massachusetts, I'm looking forward to the next time I visit Salem and checking it out.
Absolutely.
It's definitely worth a visit.
Where can we direct people if they're interested in learning more?
Well, thesatanictemple.com. And at the top bar or ribbon, whatever you call it, there's a learn or something like that tab, which will drop down and show you all kinds of cool stuff. And I always plug the Albany chapter's reading list for those who want to actually take a deep dive, because it's my favorite reading list.
Okay.
And that's the satanictemplealbany.com/reading, I think. Hang on.
I think so, yeah.
Cool. And then you got, I know the Satanic Temple's on Instagram, probably Twitter. It's got social media.
Yeah. If you just look for the Satanic Temple, I know it's on. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Instagram. Those are the three major ones.
Truth Social. You guys on Truth Social yet?
No. I don't think they'd let us in. Not that we ever would, but
they don't let the Satanic Temple, and then people who don't think that the election was stolen, they don't let those people in anymore either.
They don't allow sane people anywhere near them.
Exactly.
Yeah, last question. Did either of you lose a violin playing contest to the devil?
Well, I used to play violin poorly. I don't know if it was official loss or not.
I have played a lot of instruments, and I played them very poorly. So yes, I have. I have been bested by my own peers, much less the devil.
I will take that as a yes. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.